Morning, English class, English 9. This is Mr. Burke. Today we're going to do a few notes on a couple more lit terms before we read the story, The Lottery. So, today we're talking about symbols and irony. So, these are kind of things that require a little bit more thought. They're not surface level ideas for sure in literature, right? It takes some thinking and some stepping back from the details of the story, whatever you're reading, to think, oh yeah, that was ironic, or oh, this thing here's a symbol for something else. So it's not just surface level reading. We're thinking deeper about what we're reading. To start with, the term irony is very misunderstood. It is a lit term that authors use to kind of make a point or to help characterize certain characters. They could be an ironic character, or they could do things that are ironic in the story to help kind of give a little deeper meaning to what's going on. So irony itself is when there are contradicting meanings of the same situation. That could be anything from something happening to something says, an image, anything inside of a story. So a couple examples here visually. This first image is a picture of somebody taking a selfie at a historical event. It looks like a traveler. The reason why it's a little bit ironic is because this person cares more about taking a picture with something. His back is turned to the site that he's trying to see. He traveled this way to look at these museums and this art, but he's spending more time taking a picture. So it's kind of this ironic thing, like we would rather go somewhere to prove that we were there than go and enjoy the thing itself. The second image is clearly ironic because it's a picture of this bird, this seagull, on top of a seagull, a no seagull sign. It's ironic because why would a sign tell seagulls that they can't go anywhere, and why would the seagulls listen? They don't pay attention to signs. And the fact that the seagull's sitting right on top of this art the same way that it is represented on the sign is what makes it ironic. So it's kind of funny and humorous, but it's also ironic. In literature, we break up irony in a couple different ways. The first one is verbal irony. That's when words are said, but what they say, you say something and words are spoken, but we're supposed to understand the meaning as the opposite of what was said. So, for instance, if somebody's telling you a really juicy, gossipy story and you're like, oh, shut up. You want them to keep talking, but you tell them to shut up. And so it's verbally ironic because what you mean is the opposite of what you said. Another example would be something like if you're having like a really bad day and you say, somebody's like, how you going? And you're like, this is the best day ever. But really you're upset and you don't think it's the best day ever. That would be an example of sarcasm, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's also verbally ironic. The second version of irony in literature is situational. That's when somebody does something in a story, but what happens is the opposite of what was supposed to happen. So, for instance, in the play Romeo and Juliet, which you will read later on this semester, there's characters that do things. One of the characters is what he's trying to do is bring a family together, and he does that by getting some people married. But what happens after the marriage is the family gets even more apart and they fight more than they did beforehand. So he was trying to say, oh, we'll have this wedding and that'll bring the family together. But it's ironic because the wedding causes more chaos and more conflict with the family than what it was supposed to. So it's a little bit situationally ironic. And there's also like rain on someone's wedding day. It's not supposed to rain, but the opposite of what happens. Things like that. There's dramatic irony. That's the third one. This is when in a work of art or literature or a play or something like that, the audience knows something the characters inside the story don't. So this example, it might be a little bit hard to see. This is someone going up a staircase in a horror movie. You can see down here the backs of people's heads at the movie theater, and she's walking up the stairs, everybody in the audience knows that the killer is up the stairs, but she doesn't. And so she's going up the stairs, and it's ironic or dramatic and ironic because people are like, no, don't go up there. You're going to get killed. That's where the bad guy is. You know that as the audience member, but the character doesn't. So that's dramatic irony. So all of these types of irony are in stories, but we're going to look at a few as we read the next short story. Along with irony, sarcasm is usually included when you learn about this, because sarcasm is verbal irony that's supposed to be critical or have like a biting tone. So last week we learned about how tone is like an expression of the mood, of the emotion of the people or the person speaking. So if you're having a really bad day, you're more likely to be sarcastic, or if you're trying to be humorous, you can use sarcasm. When you say something in a sarcastic tone, it means the opposite of what you really mean. So here are a couple examples here on the screen. If you are with your brother and he's a very sloppy brother, you would say something like, oh, I love the mustard stains on your oversized hoodie. They really bring out the color of your eyes. That's not what you mean. You mean that your brother is a little bit messy, right? But you're saying, oh, I love it. And so you're using a sarcastic tone, and what you're saying is the opposite of what you mean. I used this example earlier, but like when something bad happens, you say, well, that's just what I needed today. And your tone is sarcastic, and the words you say are opposite of what you really mean. So those are examples of sarcasm. Sarcasm is tough to understand because it's really more about the way you say the words, because what you're actually saying is the opposite. But that's another way to understand irony. So that's what I put in here. The last lit term we're going to talk about today is fairly easy to understand, but it requires some in-depth thinking in stories and looking for it. They don't just jump out at you unless you're trying to put together the pieces of a story, and that's a symbol. So in literature, a symbol is something that stands for a different idea, or it stands for something. A lot of times it's a bigger idea, something small and tangible, vocab word, something you can touch, that stands for something else. So a couple of great examples on the screen right there. The American flag is just a flag. It's a symbol of our nation. People see it and they know that we're talking about America, but it's a deeper symbol to Americans. Sometimes it's related to like, oh, freedom. This represents freedom to me. For other people, it represents other things like colonization and things like that. So they attach bigger ideas to this tangible flag that you can see and touch, and it means more depending on who you are. The same thing is true with the one of the short stories you read, The Necklace, right? So you have a story that's called The Necklace. What could the necklace symbolize? It could symbolize the bigger things of the story. So the story is about a necklace that gets lost, but it's also a symbol of something bigger, like wealth and the reliance on material items, things like that. So you have to make sure that you're looking out for these symbols as you go through your stories, because they help you understand better. That's this note here, that authors use symbols to give their work more meaning and make the story be about more than just the story. So there's always stories that have kind of bigger meanings, right? Like especially things like parables, or things like sort of like the stories that teach you about when you're a kid, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Briar Rabbit. Some of these stories that have like deeper meanings that are supposed to teach you things oftentimes have symbols. So those are a couple lit terms that you got to pay attention to. You'll be asked to find them in the stories that we're reading. So make sure you turn your notes in for this lecture, and we'll see you soon.